our online viewers. Welcome everyone to the Composition Lab performance. I'm Dr. Evan Meyer, and we have 8 pieces here written by some very talented students. So basically how this format is going to work is we'll play one of the students' pieces, and then our wonderful faculty trio, who just introduced themselves, but I can introduce them again for our online viewers. So we have Aaron Durham, Joelle Arnold, and Henry Stubbs. And they will give some brief feedback about each piece about how to write for these instruments. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. Our first piece is by Emery Q, and it's called Afternoon Storms, Cloud Over a Meadow. Okay, so now's the part where we will give Emery some feedback on her composition. So let's open it up to our faculty members here and see what they think about the piece.
So one comment I would have, so I think it's a great piece, and I love the contrast in this piece. It's really fun. There's kind of what I would say, playing it on an instrument, there are times where there's no space to go from arco to pizz. So I would just give a little more time, even if it's just like a split 8th note rest would be great. That's something I would say.
Yeah, so more time between going from pizzicato and arco. Any other comments for Emery?
For me, the keys are kind of wacky. So courtesy accidentals are, especially for in the viola part, there's in going from measure 26 to 27, there's a C flat, and then I think a C natural right afterwards. But if sometimes just, especially when you're reading through it, if it just like, I just want to make sure this is a C natural. So yeah, just writing in, especially when there's repetition of pitches on the staff, but they're actually, they're not this, they're like natural, sharp, or flat. Yeah.
Great.
That's what I'd say.
Bravo, Emery. I really enjoyed playing this piece. I love being in the outdoors. I run and I hike. I really appreciated how you kind of set the move with a little inscription at the beginning of the piece. Like Aaron said, I did appreciate all the different moods and the different colors and textures in this piece. I thought you did an excellent job with that. Cellistically speaking, this mostly lays pretty well. The key changes can be a little bit abrupt, however, quote-unquote professional cellist should be able to handle it. If you are composing for a younger audience, or a younger cellist I should say, maybe not as much. The only cellistic issue that I noticed was in measure 9. There is a double stop that is unfortunately a little bit unplayable. It is, I'm not sure if Dr. Evan can make a note of this, but it's the 3rd beat of measure 9. I had to omit the lower notes in order to be able to play it, but unfortunately, although that chord is playable on the piano, on the cello, no.
So that's an E major chord.
Yes.
Could you maybe show Emery how you could play an E major chord?
Sure, so there are a couple of things. If you want the roots and the 3rd, that's probably the way to go. You can also maybe invert it with the G sharp at the bass. You can also just play E and B. I took that approach. It didn't have the 3rd and the bass, but that's what I chose.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So Emery, why don't you stand up and take a bow, and let's all give Emery a round of applause. All right, that was wonderful.
I
So
wasn't sure if you were here or on Zoom. That's great.
yeah, I'll try to do a better job of introducing the students who are here.
Awesome. That's great.
All right, so next up we have Dream Sequence by Eileen Maloney Cunningham, who's right over here. Eileen, why don't you wave to everybody? All right, so we'll give it over to our ensemble.
Yeah.
All right, well, that was wonderful. So let's hear some feedback for Eileen.
I can start this time. Bravo, Eileen? Eileen, you played the Chrysler at the Strings Camp several days ago. Bravo, I really enjoyed your performance. I really liked the elegant character, especially at the beginning. It did seem very dreamlike. The biggest thing that I struggled with was the transition from pizzicato to arco. There just was maybe not enough time for me to coordinate that transition very well. So that's my only piece of constructive criticism. Some of the passage work, college age cellists should be able to handle, fairly well.
For me, there's a couple of measures. The first time in measure 16 or 15, 16, and then again in measure 32, where the second beat is hidden within the eighth note, rather than tying six, like the E of the one E and or the and of the of one into two, so that I could see where the beat is. I think that's the biggest thing for me is in those measures, being able to see where the beat is for reading.
I love this piece. I thought this was great. I especially loved how you put in expressive markings. So you have dolce at the beginning, redundancy, dying away, and spiritual. So I really liked that. Also, the double stops fall really well in a violinist's hand, so that is great. I would say, I would echo what Joella said, and I wonder if it's the like Finale or Sibelius or whatever program you're using to write, just making sure that you bar it in a way that you can see the beat very clearly. But I think just having your markings are clear going into the different sections, and I really liked that. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Let's go. Okay, our next piece is written by one of our students who is out there in the virtual world. This is Final Composition Project. So she does have a title, String Trio, Opus 1, Number 1. This is by Mia Hyams. We'll tell Mia at home to take a bow. All right, so let's hear some feedback for Mia.
I will start, and I really loved the bass line at the beginning. It's just a nice, I thought the chords you chose were just very warm. It's a nice chord progression. As far as violinistic aspects, everything laid out pretty well. You do have some courtesy accidentals, which I think are really fabulous because there's a lot of accidentals in the last 8 bars or so. So just having the courtesy accidentals are really helpful.
Do you think there's a way that she could have spelled those differently that would have made it easier to read?
Yes, so you could definitely do the B sharps as C naturals. That would be helpful. You often have the F double sharp, and just having a normal G natural would be great. You also have A double sharps, and just having a B would be very helpful.
Yes. All right, other feedback?
I don't have any, I'm realizing now in our run-through that I couldn't figure out what the wrong note was that I was playing in measure 14, and but now I know, there's a D flat there. So, but, yeah, I'm sorry that I missed that for you on the run-through. One thing that I did not attempt, is the double stop in measure 20. It's not an easy double stop, number one, but it's totally possible, but it's not easy, and also it's in pianissimo, makes it a little bit harder. Anyway, I mean, it's not that you shouldn't write that, just, I did not attempt.
Is it because of the string crossing before?
Oh, yeah, so why it's difficult, there's a large string crossing beforehand. I guess I could have worked it out so that.
Could you maybe play
maybe I
that
could
measure
play-
slowly so Mia could see?
Sure. I was just thinking about it, what fingering would I actually do? Maybe. Yeah, I think it's not an easy fingering either. Yeah.
Right, so maybe it's a challenge at the tempo.
Oh, uh-huh.
Okay,
Um,
that's helpful to know. You know, those of us that don't play strings, it's hard to visualize the string crossing sometimes. Where something, you know, that works pretty well on piano may not necessarily translate to a string instrument.
Right.
All right, Henry, do you have any?
Bravo, Mia. I really enjoyed this piece. I always appreciate the key of D flat major. At the beginning, it's a very rich key, and that was probably my most favorite part of your piece. There was one formatting issue in measure 20. I believe there are some rests that are written above my bass line. Those rests can most likely be omitted. The only other advice I would give you, the overall texture for this piece was very thin. I had a lot of rest, and there were times in the piece where everyone had measures of rest. So maybe just as a courtesy, I'm not sure if this can be applied to chamber music, but in orchestra, if a section has a long rest, there are usually some cues from other instruments that help the section know when to enter. So that's the only other piece of advice I would give you.
So in an orchestral part, cues would be small notes that are written in that are labeled with another instrument. So when you hear that instrument come in, that will let you know to come in after your period of resting. Great. Well, that's great work, Mia. Let's move on to our next piece. This is Like a Little Bird by Nina Jobanputra, who is with us. Nina, can you wave to everybody? All right, so let's take it away. work, Nina. All right, let's hear some feedback for Nina. Could one of you maybe talk about the challenges of the tempo changes in this piece and how that works in a reading situation like we're in?
Yeah, I would say generally the more time you have to rehearse the tempo change, the easier it is. So this is a situation where there's, I would say, just giving more space. And I have an example in measure 14 in my part. I have a ritardando marked, but my rhythm actually speeds up. So I have, before it, I'm having quarter notes, da, 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 and then the ritardando measure, da, 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 da. It sounds kind of frantic. So in the context of an ensemble, it's hard to get the ritardando across. If you want that relaxed feeling, sometimes it's helpful to start writing slower rhythmic units, I would say, would be my comment.
I would piggyback off of what Aaron said. Some of the tempo changes were quite accessible. I'm looking at measures 16, 15, 14. There's a retard in that measure, and the overall rhythmic activity, there's not that much going on. Going onwards to measure 19 and measure 20, both Joel and I have rallentandos, I believe, and we do have 16th notes. It is somewhat difficult to achieve a satisfactory rallentando under short circumstances. So that is one instance of a passage that we would need to rehearse a lot.
But with some rehearsal.
Yes, it could be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, that must be, really tough to be a composer and you want an effect and, but you also have to, you also have to consider, what's going to be doable in the performance that you have, I guess. I hadn't really thought about that before, but, I actually had the opposite experience of Henry, that I thought that the writ in measure 14 to 15 was a little bit hard for me to follow, and the rallentando in 19, 20, 21 was a little bit easier for me to follow. And I think that's just because I understood it's because I understood what the other parts had at that point, and it was easy. Maybe it was easier for me to understand, because it was more standardly, this is a cadential figure, da 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 da, oh yeah, that's where the downbeat is. Maybe that's I'm just talking. I don't know if that's worth anything.
But I do think it's very helpful for our young composers to understand that you do have to write for the situation that your piece is being played in. We often kind of think we want to write for an ideal. We want the Vienna Philharmonic to play our piece, but sometimes you're writing for a student ensemble. You may be writing music for a film where they're essentially sight reading. So you kind of have to balance those considerations. So something with a lot of tempo changes can be a challenge in this situation. But if it was something that they were rehearsing and playing for a recital, then it wouldn't be a problem at all.
No problem.
Yeah, no problem.
Mhm.
I also
Yep.
just really like your sweeping gestures. The scale figures they fit really well in a string instrument.
All right. Well, let's give Nina another hand. All right. And so we'll move on to one of our virtual students. This is, and he's going to make me pronounce French. Nénuphars dans la Fondation. I know I butchered that. But this is Jeffrey's String Trio number 1, Opus 3. He's ahead in his opus numbers. And the piece is by Jeffrey Tan.
A beat and a half seconds.
Jeffrey there at home to take a bow. So I will tell you all, Jeffrey is a violinist. So the writing for the instruments is probably pretty idiomatic.
Yes.
Any other feedback for him?
I really enjoyed this, Jeffrey. We read before the beginning of the rehearsal the first half of this, so the return of the opening was a little bit of a surprise to me, and I thought that was a very enjoyable moment in your composition. Overall, for me, this piece was, it lays very well upon my instrument. The main challenge for me was probably achieving all of the dynamic markings. The dynamic markings, they're totally doable. That's just where I had to focus all of my energy on this composition.
Yeah, I don't have any constructive feedback that this makes sense to play, and Viola had a nice little moment.
Yeah, I would say it's written really well for string playing. One thought for a setting like a string trio, when you have a chamber ensemble, in your third bar, you have it marked as an entire bow, which is totally doable. But often in a chamber setting, you'll want to play more soloistically, and so it just means it'll be softer to get all those notes in one bow. So I ignored that bowing and I took two bows. So that may be not what you wanted, but just in the mind of what I was thinking as a performer, I wanted to have a little more sound.
Wonderful. All right, so let's move on. The remainder of our students are virtual. So the next piece is called Penguin Party by Gibran Jaffrey. And let's take it away. All right. So I've already given Gibran some feedback about this. One thing that I noticed as you played through it, the way some of the rhythms are placed within the bar present some challenges. I'm thinking like measures 1, 2, and 3. Ya da 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 dum, rest da 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 da. Is there maybe a way to group that would make it easier to play?
I was okay with that, to
Okay.
be honest. I don't know.
I mean, once I got it, like it is strange, but like, oh, that's how this piece is gonna go. Then I understood it. But yeah, I don't really know much about meters, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're groups of 6,
Uh-huh.
right? So maybe this is in
Yeah.
6/4.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
overall
that's true.
rhythms within this piece are relatively simple, but I did feel like I had to be on my toes for this
Yeah.
piece for some reason.
Mhm.
Yeah, I will actually say later on, so this is starting in measure 7. You have the groupings. I have suspensions over the beat, and then what was tricky is in measure 14, I come off the suspensions, but instead of writing half notes, you're still writing 2 quarter notes with the tie. So I expected them to still be suspensions. But if in measure 14 you just went to half notes, that would fix that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that same area, Joelle, you have some pretty low double stops.
Mhm.
Are all of those playable?
No, they're not playable in measure 13, beats 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, but then from then on, they're playable. That's a little bit of an exam. There's a lot of thirds. I don't know what instrument you play. If it's not a string instrument, this would be something that, like, I mean, I would need to practice a lot more than I did to play all the thirds. So,
Mhm.
And especially the impossible ones.
So why are those low thirds impossible?
Oh, why are they impossible? Because the D, starting on beat 1, D and F sharp are on the same string, and it's the lowest string. So I can't. It's not like I can change positions or anything to get both of those notes. They're just on the same string. I can't.
So the lowest string on the viola is the C string, and then the next one above that is the G string. So if you want to play 2 notes below that G, it's impossible because you need 2 strings to play 2 notes at the same time. Always helpful. Any other feedback for Gibran?
Can we ask him a question or no? I was curious where you got the name for this piece or what drew his inspiration. It's such a cute name.
So Gibran, if you're there, there's a live chat here. If you want to tell us what your inspiration for the title, Penguin Party, is, you can go ahead and type that in the live chat, and I'll tell everyone after the next piece. All right, so next up we have a string trio in E major by Den and Zhang.
Is there another stand I could use?
Yes. We're just
That's
getting another
probably the
stand.
best solution.
This is a long one.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So this piece is very much in like a classical style, like it could be Haydn or Mozart. One thing that we were talking about when Denning was working on this piece is, so Denning is a pianist, and we were trying to figure out how to translate some of those classical textures from the piano to the string trio. So I'm just wondering how this sort of compares to other string trios or string quartets from that era that you played.
I have to be honest, I have not done that many string trios. I have done some string trios by Beethoven, but that is late classical, early romantic. The textures in the Beethoven string trios, even the early ones, are somewhat thicker. The early Beethoven trios, Aaron's passage work would probably be comparable to what you can find in those. My passage work in the Beethoven trios are a lot more involved as opposed to this. I was a lot more accompanimental in this piece.
So you wanted more activity in your part.
Yes, and maybe to alleviate some pressure off the upper strings in this piece.
Yeah. So speaking of the upper strings, how did you feel about your part? It's demanding, right?
Yeah, it falls nicely in the hand.
Okay.
So it's scalar, there's arpeggios. It'd be nice to just have a little bit and just, work on a few things. But it does fall really nicely. I will say that my favorite part about chamber music is the dialogue with all the parts. So I wanted more sharing of the spotlight. I would love to have a little scalar passage and send it off to one of my colleagues. Yeah, because a lot of it is just the melody is in the violin, and it would be fun to have that passed around a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think this piece would benefit from is some articulation marks. So Joelle, you play what we call an Alberti bass part. Could you just play like the first couple of measures for us?
So I had been playing, but what's actually, because that's in the style, but what's written is.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're doing more détaché.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm doing more the other one, détaché. Détaché sounds like it would be detached, but it's détaché is. This is détaché. Yeah, so I'm doing more of a brush stroke.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. That's helpful to know. And so that's stylistically what you would do.
Yeah.
So how should Denning have notated that?
I don't know. I mean, I knew what to do, but I guess I don't know. I don't recall. I guess what's normally done in
Okay.
yeah, in a classical piece. If there are, I mean, if you wanted to be clear, I guess you could do dots and then like simile, something like that.
Okay. Any other feedback for Denning?
There were several double stops in my piece that were not very cello friendly. I did have to omit at least one note where these double stops appeared. Examples of that would be the very last measure of the piece, measure 23, and then measure 45.
Could you, I think the double stop at the very end was illustrative of this. Could you play
So,
that for us?
yeah, this is what I resorted to. However, it's notated. So that could maybe be done if it was one chord and if I rolled the double stop. However, with the rhythm that's in the part, it's
Yeah.
very challenging.
So the chord there, it's just the root and the fifth of an E major chord. So
Yes.
is there a double stop or a triple stop there that would sound more resonant?
If you want the bass at the bottom, that's probably the way to go. That's also an option, however, the root of the chord is not in the lower voice. So.
Right. We definitely want the root down there. All right. Any other feedback for Denning? No. Okay. Well, so we have an update from Gibran about Penguin Party. He says it sounded very festive and thought of Happy Feet. Just the idea of a group of penguins at a reunion or party was fun. All right. So we have our last piece on the program. This is Voyage by Yuhan Lee. right. So very dark voyage. All right, any feedback for Johan?
I really enjoyed performing this piece. It lays very well on the cello, and I can't really explain why. It was just very fun to play. A lot of the pizzicatos were very ringy, which I appreciated, and then I appreciated all of the dynamic markings that were in the score.
I guess maybe I don't know if Henry and I are maybe talking about the same thing, but in this one there were a couple of moments where I felt, and I don't know, to me, maybe not about, maybe it's more about me than about the piece, but like that I heard what Aaron was doing, like, oh, now I understand what I'm doing. Yeah, so, I don't know, it's like a little secret surprise that that illuminates my part by hearing it in context. Anyway, and the pizzicato to arco stuff, I have it in. I wanted to mention it just because that it's come up in some of the other pieces. In this one, there's pizzicato one measure, arco the next measure, but this works for me. Whereas in some of the other ones were harder because I can easily change my bow so that I can end up here. So I can just do up, and then I'm right there. So I don't need any time to transition. Unlike in some of the other ones, if you were doing pizzicato, then maybe ending up at the tip and then needing to go back to pizzicato. So anyway, so this is equally as fast transition, but it works.
Yeah, I love the dialogue in this piece. So I think the phrases get passed around, and you can really hear that. I think the texture helps that. So when Joella has the eighth notes and we're at the solo line, I have half notes and I'm much more calm. So it allows the different voices to speak really well. And I would just say, something you could think about, if I have a lot of eighth notes in my part, and one thing you could do to vary it more is to change up the slur patterns. So right now it's just separate. And maybe that's what you want, but you could do things like, or you could do, or combinations. So just something to think about.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Often we don't necessarily think about the way that articulation can just sort of transform the interpretation and mood and musicality of the piece. So I'm always encouraging my students to be really hyper-specific about that kind of stuff. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us.
That's great.
Let's give our performance a round of applause. All right, and everybody online, thank you for joining us. I hope you have a great summer.